What's going on, people? This is Akala, Knowledge is Power, Grime Daily, Book Check. You get me? What I've done here, I've picked out a little selection of some of my favourite books that we're going to talk about for a little bit. Brought some of the history selection from the proper library just to go through, and then I brought some philosophy and poetry and novels and stuff. So we're going to talk through a couple of the books. Little book check. This one right here, real useful book by a gentleman I actually happen to know, a scholar I respect a lot, a gentleman named Robin Walker. This is a good book because it's an African history book. It's called Before the Slave Trade, as you can see, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's all about African history prior to the slave trade. But what's good about this book, it's all pictures. So you've got pictures of the medieval and ancient African civilizations right across the continent. So it's like, it's not just words, it's not just someone's opinion, it's the photographic evidence. So I would say this is a key one for the collection for anyone interested in African history, black history, whatever you want to call it, human history. This is definitely a book you need in your collection. This one here, another one edited by Professor Van Sertima, collection of essays about the role of black women in antiquity, about the role African women played in ancient civilizations. So this book right here is one called They Came Before Columbus. This was actually written by Professor Van Sertima, and it's They Came Before Columbus, the African Presence in Ancient America. And what this basically details is evidence supporting the case that there was indeed an African presence in ancient America. All kinds of evidence, from carvings to linguistic connections to plant connections, etc, etc, etc. Now, of course, to people whose only conception of African history comes from a Tarzan movie, the idea that Africans could have ever sailed anywhere would seem ridiculous. But to those who bothered to study books like Before the Slave Trade, those who bothered to get a grasp of the fact that even according to the BBC documentary Millennium, the richest country in the world, not in Africa, in the world in the 1300s, was the Mandingo Empire, Mali. And in fact, ironically, Columbus's own diary is one of the main sources of evidence in this book here. So I'd say to people, read it, digest the evidence, decide for yourself. Naturally, when the book came out, it got a lot of criticism. So Professor Van Sertima followed up with this, Early America Revisited, responded to some of the critics and followed up with subsequent research. So I would say to people, maybe even read both, decide how you feel about the issue. So that's our African history section, just a small beginning of an introduction to that area of study. We're now going to look at just a small collection of some of my other favourite books in this book check here. This one, a book known as the Tao Te Ching, one of the wisest books ever written, many people say. 81 really short verses about the nature of existence, nature of reality. It's a philosophical book. This book is by one of my favourite authors, a gentleman by the name of Ayi It's a novel called The Healers. This book, one of the most famous books of the 20th century, 100 Years of Solitude, by one of the most famous authors of the 20th century, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Really, really great book. Set in Colombia. I can't say enough good about this book. It's a real spiritual novel. Another one of the most brilliant authors of the 20th century, and also a Nobel Prize winner, Hermann Hesse, which is going to be our final book for this book check here. It's a book called The Glass Bead Game. It's a meditative book. It's basically about a group of intellectuals that live like monks, almost like Shaolin monks, but for intellectuals, in this separate city outside of society, paid for by society there. But they're out there and they're studying. There's no limit to what they're allowed to study, but they're not allowed to interfere with society or mess with society in any way. And they become almost like an experiment, and they play this game called The Glass Bead Game, which seems like he was almost anticipating the internet. It's like a game that contains all of the information of human history and mathematics and science. And I can't really explain the game, I would just say read the book, but another brilliant book, life-changing book, as are all the books on the desk. So Akala, Knowledge is Power. It's my first little book check here. Tweet me at Akala Music if you want any more information on the books in question or any more of a reading list. I do post reading lists quite regularly. Big up, Grime Daily.
Not discrediting Love Zeppelin too, just giving credit where credit is due. That blog soap word rappers still use, all it really shows is we still self-abuse.